Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. Drake Orus wiped the grease from his hands, the rag doing little more than smearing the grime across his already stained fingers. The mechanical bay of Sector 7 groaned around him, filled with the dying rattle of yet another transport engine, choking on a decaying plasma core. The air reeked of coolant and old metal, and the recycled oxygen left a metallic tang on his tongue. He'd been fixing broken machines on Alamira for most of his life, but today, something in the pit of his stomach told him that the planet was about to break him instead. The announcement crackled through the bay's outdated comm system, distorted and barely intelligible, over the static hum of electromagnetic interference. All citizens report to Central Plaza. Mandatory attendance for genetic purification ceremony 447. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. The words were cold, clinical routine, but the number sent a chill crawling down Drake's spine. 447. They used to call them educational demonstrations when Genetech first arrived. That was 20 years ago. Now they didn't bother with euphemisms. Drake slid out from under the rust-caked transport hall, every joint in his body protesting with a creak. He was only 32, but the heavy gravity of Alamira and the endless exposure to synthetic lubricants made him feel twice that. His lungs ached from breathing recycled air and nanodust. As he peeled off his work jacket, he paused by the bay's viewport. Outside streams of people were already making their way toward the plaza, trudging like blood cells through a network of stone arteries. Most walked with the defeated shuffle of those who'd long accepted their fate. Others disturbingly moved with a sick sort of anticipation, eyes bright with fanaticism or morbid curiosity. Drake had seen enough of these ceremonies to last him several lifetimes. He had stopped attending after number 300. But today, something tugged at him, a weightless tension in his chest like static before a storm. He'd been having the dreams again. They came every night now, the same vision always, a woman alien breathtaking. Her skin shimmered violet in the half-light, her silver hair drifting like liquid starlight. She was always kneeling, her legs encased in some gray, creeping substance, her hands trembling as she looked toward him with eyes that knew too much. "Find me," she would whisper, voice echoing through the black void around her. "Please." Drake never responded in the dream. He always woke up drenched in sweat, heart hammering, convinced he had lost something precious, something vital, and now ceremony 447. He threw on his jacket and made his way into Alamira's perpetual twilight. The air was thick with a chemical haze that turned every breath into a chore. The central plaza unfolded like a brutal amphitheater, carved into the side of the colony's capital block. Concentric rings of steps dropped down toward a central platform, an altar more than a stage lit by harsh white lights and flickering hollow banners. The Genetech insignia, a triple helix, rotated lazily above the plaza, accompanied by slogans, "Purity through unity, evolution through selection, the future has no room for the past." 20,000 people were already gathered, packed shoulder to shoulder. Drake pushed into the back, keeping his head low. The crowd buzzed like a hive, curious, tense, hungry. He caught fragments of conversations. "They say it's a high-value trader. One of the Las Vakes, consort of Kavin, the rebel leader." His pulse stumbled. Vake, that word was loaded with ancient pain. The Vakes were a species once allied with the Salary, the race Drake had never met, but somehow felt bonded to in his bones. The corporate narrative painted them as seditionists, bloodline corruptors. But to the resistance, they were symbols, living embodiments of defiance against Genetech's genetic tyranny. Drake's eyes scanned the center platform just in time to see movement. Two Genetech guards in gleaming armor emerged, flanking a smaller figure. The woman was forced to walk shackled at the wrists and ankles, but her spine remained straight, her head high. Even from this distance, her presence struck him like a hammer to the chest. The way she moved, graceful but unyielding, he knew it was her. The woman from his dreams, the one sealed in gray stone, whispering to him across dimensions. His breath caught. The plaza's noise quieted as a tall man stepped up to the podium. Director Grunner, the Butcher of Quadrant 12, his white uniform was spotless, his face etched with sterile cruelty. Citizens of Alamira. He began, his voice magnified across the stadium. A day, we witnessed the inevitable conclusion of genetic arrogance. The Vaex traitor before you was a companion of terrorist cabin leader of the failed rebellion. She attempted to dilute our pure bloodline with xenofilth, but purity prevails. The crowd murmured, some jeering, others quiet with unease. Drake couldn't move, couldn't blink. His dream was real. Her skin shimmered faintly under the lights. Her silver hair framed a face that carried more dignity in one glance than Grunner's entire speech. She has rejected our generous offer to contribute to the genetic advancement program, Grunner continued. Instead, she chose chaos, and so she will become a monument. Drake's mouth went dry. He knew what was coming. The guards led her to the platform's center, an etched circular depression surrounded by mechanical arms. Era, he finally remembered her name from Rebel broadcasts, stood quietly, not with submission but calm defiance. This compound is called Crystal Creek Grunner, explained, gesturing to a console. It reacts to fear. Despair makes it permanent. She will be an eternal reminder of what happens when deviation defies design. The platform whirred to life. The compound began to flow. And as it reached her feet, Ara looked up. Through the throng of faces, her eyes locked with his. It was not coincidence. It was not confusion. It was recognition. Soul-deep, dream-woven recognition. Drake felt his heart skip and stutter. And her lips moved, barely audible across the distance, but unmistakable. Find me. He had no idea how, no plan, no weapon. But somehow in that moment, Drake Orus knew he was going to save her, or die trying. The crystallcrete oozed from the hidden vents in the platform, a silvery gray fluid that shimmered unnaturally beneath the plaza lights. It moved like it had a mind of its own, thick and slow, but with intent. The moment it touched Ara's feet, the crowd collectively inhaled, a silent, cruel anticipation rippling through the onlookers like a wave. Her bare skin shimmered faintly as the compound slithered around her ankles, beginning its grim work. Drake's fingernails dug into his palms. His breath came fast and shallow, heart pounding as if it were trying to punch its way out of his chest. She stood perfectly still, her back straight, her chin lifted. But even from a distance, he noticed the subtle tremor in her fingers, a flicker of uncertainty, not fear, not yet, but close. They feed on fear, he whispered to himself. Don't give them any. As if she'd heard, Ara tilted her head ever so slightly and looked toward him again. It wasn't a desperate glance. It was steady, deliberate, trusting. Recognition pulsed again, stronger this time, an echo in his bones, a frequency humming in his bloodstream. Something ancient and buried. Something passed through bloodlines, through species, through time itself. In her, Drake saw not just the woman from his dreams, but something more, a mirror of himself, a soul refracted from the same broken star. Director Groner's voice boomed across the plaza, dragging the crowd's focus back to the spectacle. Let this be a lesson, peoples of Alamira. The path to human evolution does not lie in corruption or sedition. The path lies in discipline, purity, and sacrifice. This creature chose chaos. Now she becomes warning. The crystal crete crept higher, reaching her calves. It hardened as it moved, transforming from fluid to a glossy stone-like substance that clung to her legs like shackles from a forgotten hell. The crowd shifted, some leaning forward, others murmuring prayers or curses. A few shouted encouragements, vile things that made Drake's fists clench. Ara closed her eyes. The crowd mistook it for surrender. Drake knew better. She was centering herself. The compound responded to fear, but she wasn't afraid, not yet. Still it moved, because the fear didn't have to come from her alone. It was feeding on the entire plaza, on the twisted anticipation of the crowd, on the unspoken terror of every hybrid, every second-class citizen, every worker who lived one mistake away from a death sentence. The crystal crete was drawing strength from collective dread, and it was winning. Drake had to do something. He didn't know what his hands were empty, his jacket threadbare, his identity nothing more than a barcode in the Genetech registry. But deep inside him, something was shifting, something primal, not rage, not even love, something older, recognition. The last time he had felt it was in a dream, where Aera had reached out through the void, her voice echoing in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. Now she was real, and she was being buried alive. Around him, the fear amplifiers activated. Low-frequency pulses vibrated through the stone beneath his feet, designed to stir the reptilian parts of the brain, panic, helplessness, surrender. The crowd began to sway as if lulled by an unseen rhythm. Some wept, others chanted, all fed the crystal crete. Drake shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You're not taking her." He began pushing forward. The crowd was thick-packed elbow to elbow. Most people didn't notice him at first, but as he moved faster, they began to push back. A man barked at him to get in line. A woman snarled that she couldn't see. Drake didn't stop. He forced his way through the bodies, drawing closer to the lower tiers. Every step down was a fight, but he didn't care. Ahead, the platform loomed. The crystal crete had reached Ara's knees. She still hadn't moved, but her jaw had tightened, sweat glistening on her forehead. The compound was fighting for her soul now, not just her body, and she was losing ground. Drake's movements became more urgent, reckless. He elbowed past a cluster of workers, ducked under a camera drone, and reached the halfway tier. From here, the scent of the crystal crete reached him, a sour, synthetic bitterness laced with something ancient, like scorched minerals and blood. A corporate guard blocked his way. "That's far enough, citizen." Optimal viewing zone achieved. Drake flashed his maintenance badge. "Platform stabilizer alert," he lied, breathless. "Pressure spike. Could collapse." The guard narrowed his eyes. "You're not authorized." Drake's hand drifted to the small of his back where his plasma cutter was clipped, standard repair tool, standard issue, capable of slicing steel in seconds. But he didn't draw it. Not yet. Not here. Instead, he gave the guard a disarming shrug and backed off. The guard turned away. Drake moved. 3 quick steps, and he vaulted the safety barrier, rolling onto the platform's edge. Shouts erupted. Grunner's voice cracked like a whip through the comms. "Security breach." "Stop him!" Drake didn't listen. He was already sprinting toward Ara, who now stood encased to her mid-thighs, the crystal crete pulsing like a living creature. Her eyes widened as he dropped to his knees before her. Her lips parted. "Drake?" It wasn't a question. It was a memory remembered. He pressed his hands to the compound. It felt alive, warm and buzzing with absorbed fear. For a moment, he thought it might swallow him too, but then his fingers began to glow, not with light, but with resistance. Hairline cracked spiderweb from where he touched the surface. No Grunner gasped over the speakers. "That's impossible." The guards hesitated. The crystal crete began to shatter. Chunks fell away from Ara's legs like brittle glass, breaking faster and faster. The crowd screamed, some in terror, others in awe, as the monument cracked and crumbled before their eyes. The impossible was happening. Drake didn't know how. He didn't care. He just knew he was going to free her, and then burn down everything that tried to stop him. Alarms screamed across the plaza as the crystal crete collapsed in jagged slabs at Drake's feet, the once living prison now reduced to dust and fragments. Era stumbled, her legs still trembling from the prolonged entombment, but Drake caught her before she fell. Her skin was warm, humming with residual energy, and when their eyes met, truly met, there was no doubt. Not memory, not coincidence. Destiny. Around them, chaos erupted. "Security. Breach." Grunner's voice cracked through the amplifiers, now less composed and more panicked. "Apprehend the saboteur. Terminate the subject if necessary." Drake didn't hesitate. He threw his arm around Era's waist and pulled her close. "Can you run?" he asked. "I can fly if you can carry me," she rasped. That was all he needed. The first guard reached them, rifle raised, but Drake moved faster than he thought possible. With one hand, he yanked his plasma cutter from its holster and sliced through the guard's weapon, the blade carving through polymer and alloy like it was made of paper. Sparks flew and the guards screamed, stumbling backward. More were coming. They were surrounded. Drake looked at Era. "Do you trust me?" She nodded even though her knees were shaking. He closed his eyes, and the world shifted. It started as a vibration beneath his feet, then a humming pressure in the back of his skull. The ground beneath the platform buckled. Air distorted around them like heat rising off pavement, but sharper, alive with tension. Then, like an invisible spring, uncoiling, gravity itself turned traitor. The guards nearest them stumbled, then screamed as they were flung upward, not by force, but by the very space beneath them, twisting out of alignment. One was hurled across the plaza into the upper terraces. Another flew sideways into a drone, sending both crashing in a shower of sparks. Drake stood at the center of it all, arms around Era, as the gravitational field folded beneath their feet like the surface of a liquid mirror. They rose, not through machinery, not through rockets, through will, through instinct, through power. The crowd erupted into panic. People screamed and stampeded, pushing and trampling each other as the very laws of physics warped around the stage. Those who had jeered moments earlier now cowered, eyes wide with terror, as the saboteur in the Vake's princess ascended like gods of vengeance. The lights above the plaza flickered and shorted out, unable to keep up with the energy spike. Pulse fire lanced through the air from a squad of guards trying to shoot them down, but the bolts curved away harmlessly, bending in midair, as if even light itself had changed allegiance. Drake held on tighter to Ara as they drifted above the crowd, above the stage, above the horror. "I don't know how I'm doing this," he said through clenched teeth. "You're not alone," she whispered back. "You never were." That's when he realized her presence was feeding into his own power. It was more than support. It was resonance. Her genetic frequency was harmonizing with his, amplifying the dormant abilities passed down through his Solari bloodline. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. Together, they were transcending. Behind them, Grunner barked orders in desperation. Drones launched into the sky, attempting to intercept them. A net of anti-personnel bursts exploded in a cone pattern, but nothing touched them. The air curved away from their bodies, warped by an unseen shield made not of metal or energy, but sheer gravitational manipulation. Drake and Ara cleared the plaza's perimeter and sailed over the rooftops of Alamira's corporate blocks, the artificial twilight casting their figures in surreal silhouette. The further they got it from the plaza, the more Drake's hold over gravity began to falter, not from weakness, but from uncertainty. He didn't know where to go, but Ara did. "There's a place," she murmured into his ear, "south of the refineries beneath the canyon ridge. A research station abandoned after the salary purge. I saw it in your dreams." "You were in mine," he said, breathless. "Every night. Because I was calling you." They dropped lower now, skimming rooftops as Drake's control waned. He wasn't trained for this. His muscles screamed from exertion and blood pounded in his ears like drum fire. Below, corporate skiffs were already patrolling spotlights, scanning alleys and rooftops. They had maybe minutes before the entire district locked down. Drake angled toward a service tram line and landed rough, stumbling into a roll with Ara in his arms. Metal scraped flesh. Pain flashed white in his ribs, but he didn't let go. "Are you?" he began. "Fine," she said, wincing. "Just move." They fled down the tramway, ducking under cables and leaping over rusted barriers. Sirens wailed behind them, more lights, shouting, the sound of security drones growing louder. They cut through a half-flooded maintenance tunnel, the acidic water eating through the soles of their boots. They slipped through a security grate, climbed an ancient ladder, and emerged into the jagged edge of the city's forgotten underbelly. Smoke choked the air here. The sky pulsed orange with industrial runoff and artificial lightning. No one came here. No one survived here. Except ghosts, and now them. They reached the canyon ridge just as the first skiff soared overhead. Drake stumbled to a halt, panting. "There," Ara pointed, her voice hoarse. "See the ridgefold. There's a concealed access panel behind the old mineral survey scanners." Drake followed her finger and found it a sliver of metal in the rock. He approached, half expecting to be shot on sight. Instead, the panel blinked green. It recognized him. Or rather, it recognized what lived inside him. A hiss, the metal door creaked open. a tunnel yawning down into darkness. Drake looked back one last time at the skyline of Alamira, the flickering banners, the silent drones scanning the rooftops, the ceremony they had ruined, the system they had defied. He turned to Ara. "You ready?" "No," she said, "but I'm done running." Together, they descended into the dark, and behind them the door sealed shut. The tunnel sealed behind them with a heavy mechanical hiss, cutting off the flickering orange twilight of Alamira's polluted sky. In its place came silence, deep, pressing, absolute. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was their breath, Drake's sharp and ragged, Ara's steadying with each inhale. Emergency lights flickered on along the curved ceiling, casting a dull blue glow down the rock-hewn corridor. The air inside smelled of iron and dust and something older, something ancient like forgotten storms. "This place," Drake said, resting a hand against the wall, "it feels alive." "It should," Ara answered softly, her voice echoing off the stone. "Your ancestors carved it. The salary didn't build with concrete and steel. They shaped matter, grew their structures like trees bending to light." Drake turned to her. "You know this place?" "I've never set foot in it," she said, "but I've seen it in your memories, in your blood." That phrase made him pause. "My blood." She met his gaze, something solemn glowing in her violet eyes. "The dreams, they weren't just coincidence. The moment you touched the crystal crete, I felt the bond activate. Our species, mine and yours, we were once allied. More than that, genetically linked, compatible at the quantum level." Drake blinked. "You're saying we were made to find each other?" "Not by chance," she said. "By design, thousands of years ago." The corridor widened into a circular chamber, its walls etched with glowing symbols that pulsed softly, responding to their presence. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen, organic like bone and coral fused into symmetry. A central platform rose from the floor, surrounded by decayed machinery, cracked consoles, and overturned data slates covered in mold. "Come here," Eris said, guiding him to a reclining examination bed built from a blend of metal and mineral. She eased herself onto it, groaning slightly as pain caught up with her. Only now did Drake notice the damage. Her legs, where the crystal crete had begun fusing, were lined with bruises and abrasions. Her skin was raw, in places glowing faintly with internal light. And along her arms, faint welts hinted at rough handling, restraints, injections. Drake's fists clenched. "I'll find med supplies," he said. "Storage cabinets far wall," she murmured, reclining back. Drake crossed the room and yanked open a rusted panel. Inside were ancient, dust-covered kits, labeled in both salary glyphs and galactic common. To his surprise, most of it was still viable, sealed in vacuum packaging, the way only pre-corporate civilizations bothered to do anymore. He pulled out a canister of regenerative gel and a basic scanner. As he returned, Ara had already unfastened what was left of her ruined jumpsuit from the knees down, exposing the crystal-scarred skin beneath. "I'm sorry," Drake muttered, kneeling beside her. "This might sting." "I've had worse," she said, managing a smirk. "You should have seen my last date." Drake cracked a grin despite himself and began applying the gel. It reacted instantly, with her skin hissing softly as nanites activated. The luminescent patterns under her surface pulsed brighter wherever he touched. He tried not to stare. "To the patterns," he said, "they're beautiful. Their energy paths," she explained. "Vague's bodies channel ambient energy through our nervous systems. The markings form as our abilities mature." His hand hesitated. "They glow when I touch you." She looked at him, studying him. "Because your energy is resonant, like striking a chord on a string instrument. We match." Drake swallowed hard. "I felt different my whole life, stronger in ways I couldn't explain. And the dreams. Your salary blood was dormant," she said. "Genetech thought they'd wiped your kind out, but one slipped through." "My mother," he whispered. "She never talked about my father. Said he died in the mining riots." Ara reached up and touched his face. "She saved you, kept your lineage hidden until now." The silence between them stretched, not awkward, but reverent, like standing before the edge of something vast. Finally, Drake stood, needing to move, needing to think. He wandered toward the glowing wall panels, his fingers brushing over ancient glyphs that reacted to his touch. A hollow projector blinked on. The chamber filled with ghostlight, holograms of cities that defied explanation. Towering spires of glass and living root floating vessels shaped like manta rays gliding through crystalline skies. People walked through these cities tall, graceful, radiant-skinned. Salary. My ancestors, Drake whispered. They didn't conquer Alamira, Era said behind him. They bonded with it. Their technology was symbiotic. They didn't program machines, they grew them. The projection shifted, black clouds rolled over the skies, and corporate ships descended like daggers. What followed was horror. Camps, forced extractions, crying children torn from families, vivisection tables, genocide. Drake clenched his jaw. They didn't understand your technology, so they tried to strip it from your DNA. Ara joined him. My people, the Vakes, we tried to protect them. Our alliance ran deep, but we were targeted too. Our ability to connect to channel energy, they feared it. The final image lingered, a baby wrapped in silver cloth, eyes wide hidden in the arms of a dying mother. Drake looked down at his hands. They killed her. My mother. After I was born. She gave you a chance to change everything. He turned back to her, and now, she looked at him, eyes fierce. Now the universe finds out what happens when the last Salari and the last free Vakes stand together. A pulse echoed through the floor, deep and slow like a heartbeat in stone. The facility recognized them. The past had awakened, and it was ready to fight. Drake lay awake on the floor of the inner chamber, staring at the ceiling where bioluminescent threads glowed like constellations in motion. The air was warmer here, alive with the hum of the station's reawakening systems. The facility, though abandoned for decades, responded to his presence as if it had merely been waiting for him, for her, for this. Across the room, Ara stood beneath a soft cascade of water from a vertical purifier, letting it wash away the pain and chemicals that had clung to her skin since her capture. The luminescent patterns across her body were brighter now, more defined like starlight traced beneath her flesh. Her silhouette moved with graceful precision, but Drake could sense the weight she carried, the trauma, the exhaustion, and something more. When she stepped out and wrapped herself in the woven biofabric the station had synthesized, woven from living fibers that pulsed faintly with warmth, she looked at him without hesitation. I can feel it, she said softly. The change. My body's beginning its fertility cycle. Drake's breath caught. Fertility. Ara nodded and moved closer. It's rare, once in a lifetime for Vakes women, triggered only by a deep genetic resonance with a mate. You mean me, he whispered. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she took his. I know we've only just met in this life, but our blood remembers each other. My body, it's already preparing. I don't have years or months. I have days, 3, maybe 4. If I don't conceive during the cycle, I'll die. Drake stared at her, struggling to form words. That's not a choice. That's a sentence. It's biology, she said, leaning into him. But it's also destiny. I'm not afraid, Drake. Not of you. Not of this. He looked into her eyes, searching for hesitation and finding none. The urge to flee, to doubt, evaporated in the heat of her presence. She wasn't begging. She wasn't cornered. She was choosing him. Their kiss wasn't urgent, but inevitable. Their lips met in a slow dance of recognition, not desire alone, but remembrance. The aching relief of long-lost beings finally coming home. The room responded to them. Walls glowed, sensors stirred, gravity flexed with each heartbeat. When they lay together skin to skin, the facility reacted not with alarms or cold sensors, but with harmony. The bioluminescent threads in the walls brightened to a soft gold. The floor pulsed gently, echoing their joined rhythm. And beneath it all, a soft thrum of energy began to build. Their union wasn't just physical, it was energetic, emotional, evolutionary. And as they moved together, the boundaries of their minds blurred. Thoughts drifted between them, unspoken and complete. Visions of stars of memories that weren't just theirs, but ancestral. Shared bloodlines singing to each other after centuries apart. Afterward, Wrapped in each other in the soft light of the living chamber, Drake traced the patterns along Era's spine. "What happens now?" he murmured. "Now we wait," she said, "and stay alive long enough for my body to finish the process." She looked up, suddenly at eyes alert. "What is it?" he asked. "I feel something, someone approaching." Drake sat up, his skin prickling. The facility hummed louder. The chamber dimmed like it too sensed a shift. They scrambled to their feet and accessed the control panel embedded into the wall. A primitive interface came to life, displaying pulsing dots moving through the canyon's outer edges. "Corporate strike team," Drake said, his voice grim. "They must have traced the energy signature from earlier. We've got maybe 15 minutes." He handed Era a pulse rifle he'd salvaged earlier from the lower storage lockers. She checked the charge and gave a tight nod. "I can fight," she said. "I never doubted that," Drake replied. They sealed the inner sanctum, falling back into defensive positions near the narrow tunnel entrance. The corridor was just wide enough for two people shoulder to shoulder, an advantage in close quarters combat. Drake positioned a small pulse mine at the mouth of the entrance and activated the old Solari warning glyphs along the ceiling, projecting a flickering message in untranslated script. It wouldn't stop the enemy, but it would slow them. They waited in silence, the kind that hums louder than thunder. Ara stood beside him, every inch of her trembling with pent-up energy. Her markings were glowing again, redder now, edged with violet. "They're close," she whispered. "I can feel their fear." Drake glanced at her hard hammering. "Good, let's make it worse." The explosion rocked the corridor. The mine went off just as the first corporate soldiers entered, sending shrapnel and shockwaves tearing through the stone. Screams echoed. Pulse fire filled the air. Drake opened up with the rifle, and Ara moved like a shadow beside him, fast lethal fluid. She darted through blind spots, striking pressure points, disarming guards before they could react. Her movements were dance-like, guided by instinct and rage. But there were too many. The facility's narrow corridors bottlenecked the assault, but more troops poured in. Dozens, maybe 50. Drake summoned another pulse of energy, trying to repeat what he'd done in the plaza, but it sputtered, wavered. His control was fading, or maybe something was blocking him. "Fall back," he shouted. To the inner chamber, they retreated under a hail of fire. Ara staggered, blood trailing down her leg. Drake caught her firing blindly behind them. They burst into the sanctum and slammed the door shut, triggering the manual lockdown. Heavy slabs of alloyed rock slid into place, but it wouldn't hold forever. Ara leaned heavily against him, her pulse rapid. "I can't do this again." Drake wiped blood from her cheek. "You won't have to." But even as he said it, he could feel the corporate tech's reach expanding. The longer they stayed here, the greater the danger. Not just to them, but to what was growing inside her. She looked up at him, eyes dazed. "They'll take the child. They'll dissect it." "They'll never touch her," Drake said, jaw clenched. "I'll burn the sky first." And somehow she believed him, even as the pounding resumed outside the door, even as hope shrank into a narrow, flickering thing, even as the hunt closed in around them. The world returned in pieces. Drake awoke in agony, suspended between memory and nightmare. His mouth was dry, his head splitting with static, and his limbs hung limp, restrained by cold metal bands that hummed with low-frequency pulses. The cell was dark, lit only by faint red strips embedded in the ceiling. He tried to move but couldn't. Something buzzed against his skull like angry hornets. Neural dampeners. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. They'd caught him. And Ara, his eyes snapped open. "Ara," he shouted, but his voice came out ragged, strangled. The crown-like restraint on his head surged with feedback, sending lances of pain down his spine. He bit his lip to keep from screaming, tasted blood, and refused to give them the satisfaction. Footsteps approached. A door hissed open. Dr. Groner. The man entered with two guards in tow, flanked by a pair of drones carrying surgical tools. He was dressed in sterile white, not a speck of dust or blood on him, despite the chaos he presided over. "Still conscious," Grunner said, not even looking directly at Drake. "That's promising." Drake glared at him. "Where is she?" Grunner raised a brow. "Ah, the subject. She's quite safe for now. You, on the other hand, are about to be the most dissected man in Genetech history. He turned to the drone. Begin prep for full neural mapping. Extract spinal tissue. I want a complete readout of his gene cascade and cortical anomalies. The drone buzzed louder as a series of needles extended from its frame. Drake twisted in the restraints, but it was no use. The neural dampeners turned his thoughts to mud. His powers were gone, buried. His body might have been Solari-born, but in this moment, he was just another lab rat. The needles plunged into his back. He didn't scream, not when they scraped his vertebrae, not when they flooded his nervous system with paralyzing agents, not even when his vision swam and white light consumed the edges of his mind. Because through the pain, something else was rising. Faint, steady, a third heartbeat. At first he thought it was hallucination, but no, it was real. He felt it like a whisper under his skin. The rhythm was smaller, lighter, but undeniable. Ara was still alive, and she was pregnant. Their child already radiating energy, already reaching out across whatever distance separated them. He felt her fear, her determination, and most of all, her will to survive. Drake gritted his teeth as blood trickled from his nose. "You're not going to win," he muttered through clenched teeth. Grunner looked mildly amused. "Oh, and why is that?" "Because I'm not alone." The dampeners flared in response, trying to silence the spike of defiance in his neural signature. But it was too late. Something had cracked. Not bone, something deeper. The mental cage they had built to contain him was fracturing. With every passing second, more of his Solari lineage awoke. Images surged through his mind, memories not his own. Generations of salary warriors channeling gravitational fields with their bare hands. Biological starships that sang in harmony with their pilots. Children born glowing with living starlight. And now his child. A hybrid. A synthesis of Vax connection, Solari energy, and human resilience. A force Genetech couldn't hope to control. Neural activity spiking, one of the technicians shouted. "We've never seen this pattern before." "Increased suppression," Grunner barked. "Double the frequency." The drones buzzed louder. The crown glowed red hot. Pain detonated behind Drake's eyes, but he didn't scream. Instead, he laughed. It was quiet, broken, but it was laughter. Grunner stared at him like he was insane. "What's so funny?" Drake raised his head, blood trickling from his nose and ears. "You can't stop what's coming." The restraint on his head sparked, cracked, shattered, and suddenly the air around him bent. The gravitational pull in the room shifted just enough to rattle the metal tray beside him. The syringes rolled. One of the drones twitched midair, unable to stabilize its flight path. Power flooded back into his body. Not all at once, but like a dam, bursting one crack at a time. "You broke me," Drake whispered, voice shaking, "but breaking me woke something you don't understand." He flexed his fingers. The restraints trembled. "Subject is destabilizing the field," one technician screamed. "Sedate him," but it was already too late. The gravity in the room flipped. One of the guards screamed as he was hurled into the ceiling. Another dropped like a rag doll, his armor crumpling under the sudden force. Drake stood, the restraints melting off him like wet paper. His skin shimmered with a faint glow. His eyes burned silver. "You sealed her feet in stone," he said coldly. "Now I'll bury you." He turned toward the wall, and the wall obeyed. Stone warp bending like liquid. He stepped through the cell as if it weren't there, walking through solid rock as reality warped to accommodate his movement. Alarms screamed. Across the facility, lights shattered. Doors slammed shut. Systems failed. And in the center of it all, Drake moved like a black star, drawing in the rules of the universe and rewriting them as he went. He could feel Ara's presence above, far above, somewhere in orbit. She was in labor, and she was alone. Not for long. High above the scarred surface of Alamira, a sterile orbital facility drifted like a tumor against the stars, Genetech's top-secret genetic research station. Inside, lights flickered and klaxons screamed. Something had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong. Not a breach, a birth. In the center of the medical wing, Alara lay on an operating table drenched in sweat and blood. Her body convulsed with the final throes of labor. Alarms wailed around her, but the corporate scientists didn't move to help. They stood frozen, paralyzed, not by empathy, but by fear. Her child, had just been born. And the instant she took her first breath, everything changed. Power pulsed outward from the infant's body in waves, silent, harmonic, and utterly destructive to anything artificial. Consoles shorted out, containment fields collapsed, lights died in rapid succession. A surge of pure bioenergy scrambled their sensors and dropped the temperature across the wing by 10 degrees. The baby didn't cry. She hummed a soft, resonant frequency that hit something primal in every life form present. Impossible, whispered Dr. Tu, staggering back. The genetics, this shouldn't be viable. Alyara, breathless and trembling, pulled her daughter to her chest, wrapping the tiny glowing body in what little cloth remained. The child's skin shimmered with a fusion of patterns, Vake's geometry woven with salary energy nodes. Her eyes opened impossibly aware, reflecting deep brown rings flecked with silver. She was already looking for someone. She was already calling. At the edge of Alamira's atmosphere, a streak of silver ripped through the sky like a falling comet. Drake had no ship. He was the ship. He rode a bubble of folded space and inverted gravity, his arms cradling the life capsule that had sought him out. His daughter had arrived minutes earlier, crashing into his prison like a meteor from destiny. The moment he touched her, every limit in his body unraveled. Now gravity parted before him. Pulse cannons from orbital defenses tracked his approach, firing in a synchronized barrage meant to stop dreadnoughts. But none of the beams touched him. They bent, diverted like rain around an unseen shield. He twisted space itself, reshaping trajectories and anchoring himself to celestial geometry like a surfer riding the edge of gravity wells. "This is Platform 7, came a frantic transmission. Unknown anomaly inbound. All defense systems ineffective, request immediate evacuation." Too late. Drake reached the outer hull and walked through it. Matter at this point was a suggestion. Steel parted at his touch like silken water. Inside, the station turned to chaos. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers scattered as the gravitational core of the facility fluctuated. Lights blinked erratically. Doors opened and closed in panic. Some systems imploded, others simply ceased to exist, disconnected from physics itself. Drake didn't run. He strolled barefoot, silent, his daughter asleep against his chest. Those who tried to stop him found their weapons crumpled by invisible pressure, their bodies pinned to walls without a finger raised. He didn't kill. Not unless he had to. Not unless they tried to take her again. But he was angry, and the station felt it. He followed the pull like a beacon in his blood through twisting corridors until he reached the medical wing. The door melted before him. Inside, the room was half lit, half shattered. And at its center, Alara, he breathed. She looked up, clutching their child, her face pale but glowing from within. Her body trembled, skin marked with fresh wounds, but her eyes still burned. "You found her," she whispered, voice cracking. "I found both of you." Drake crossed the room, shielding them both with his presence. The child in his arms stirred, recognizing her mother. The air around them shimmered as their energy fields aligned three frequencies, harmonizing into one impossibly complex waveform. "I never stopped hearing you," Alara said, voice shaking. "And I never stopped coming," Drake replied. Behind them, the hallway rumbled. The last security squad had arrived. Grunner was with them. He looked worse than Drake remembered, face pale, one sleeve torn, blood trailing down his neck. But his eyes burned with hatred, not fear. "Surrender," he spat. "You can't control it. You don't even know what it is." Drake turned, slowly stepping between Grunner and his family. "I don't need to control it," he said. "I am it." Grunner raised a pulse rifle. The others followed. Drake didn't move. Pulse fire erupted, dozens of shots in perfect military sync. They all curved midair, folding like ribbons and spiraling into harmless sparks that scorched the walls. "You don't get to decide who lives anymore," Drake said coldly. He gestured. Not with his hand, with his will. Gravity exploded outward in controlled vectors. The soldiers flew backward, weapons wrenched from their hands, armor plates buckling like paper. Grunner was yanked upward and slammed into the ceiling, held there by a field of pressure, so dense the walls around him cracked. "You sealed her feet in stone," Drake said. "Now let me show you what burial really means." He turned to Alara. We have to leave. Now, she nodded. Together, they moved through the braking station, Drake bending corridors around them, creating paths where none existed. They found the Executive Escape Shuttle, a sleek, gravity-sink vessel meant for board members in times of catastrophe. He placed Alara and their child inside, then sealed the hatch with a touch. "I'll guide you from outside," he said. "Get her clear." "What about you?" she asked. "I have a promise to keep." He turned, vanishing into the disintegrating corridors of the station. Drake reached the core of Platform 7, a fusion of artificial singularities and synthetic mass condensers. It pulsed like a rotten heart. He placed both hands on the reactor walls and spoke not with voice, but with resonance. Across Alamira, every Genetech facility shuddered. Laboratories collapsed. Prisons cracked open. Weapons disassembled themselves. He wasn't destroying, he was reclaiming. He reached into the gravitational bloodstream of the planet and whispered to it, "Bury them. Deep. Forever." One by one, the corporate installations across Alamira folded downward into the bedrock. Not in explosions, but in quiet, permanent descent, as if the planet itself was exhaling poison. Above him, the station groaned and fractured. Drake let go. The core imploded, and he rose, trailing energy toward the escape shuttle, now clearing the edge of the atmosphere. The stars above opened like a curtain. He joined them. Alara held their daughter tightly as the shuttle sailed past the debris field of the broken station. Drake landed silently beside her, folding space like a man closing a door. The child cooed, a sound like wind in starlight. "Where do we go now?" Alara asked, tears in her eyes. Drake looked out at the uncharted system ahead. "Somewhere they'll never find us. And if they try," he looked at his daughter, "then the galaxy will find out what happens when you try to take a star from its sky." 2 years later, the skies were quiet. The farm stretched across the hills of a world without a name, one of those forgotten places at the edge of map space where no corporations laid claim and no empires bothered to look. A pair of suns hovered in the pale sky above, casting twin shadows across green fields that shimmered with bioluminescent crops. Drake stood ankle-deep in soil that buzzed with life, a baby strapped to his back and a spade in his hands. He was barefoot, sleeves rolled to the elbows, his hands rough from planting, not from war. Each time he dug a furrow, the ground responded, growing richer, more fertile. The child on his back giggled, and crystal-petaled flowers bloomed in her wake, curling toward her with impossible affection. She wasn't quite human. She wasn't quite Vakes or Solari. She was something new, and she was thriving. Iara watched them from under the shade of a tall, fruit-bearing tree, a hybrid graft of earth apple and Vake's memory vine. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, her second child just weeks from birth. She smiled at the sight of her husband spinning in circles as their daughter shrieked with laughter, her tiny hands flaring with sparks of light every time she touched the ground. "You're not a mechanic anymore," Era teased as he walked back toward her. "No," Drake said, dropping the spade. "I'm a gardener now." He sat beside her and kissed the curve of her stomach. The unborn child pulsed softly in response, sharing in the moment. The air around them shimmered faintly, not from heat but from resonance. Even the wind hummed in tune. Their daughter climbed into Ara's lap and curled against her belly, tiny fingers glowing as she traced the energy lines that danced beneath her mother's skin. She hummed softly, wordless, "Perfect." "She's starting to talk in tones again," Ara said, combing her daughter's silver-black hair. "I think she's already shifting the crops at the molecular level. She's teaching the plants how to sing," Drake said, grinning. Ara chuckled. "Not surprising. You were bending gravity before you even knew your own name." Drake's eyes flicked toward the stars. "Do you think they're still looking for us?" "Definitely," Ara replied without hesitation. "Genetech never lets go. They'll come eventually." Drake nodded. "Let them." He looked back at their home, a blend of salary-grown bioarchitecture and human structural engineering. The living walls pulsed faintly, responding to their presence. The entire house was wired to their daughter's aura. Doors opened when she laughed. Lights dimmed when she slept. Crops grew faster when she sang. This wasn't just survival. This was the future, and it was growing. Halfway across the galaxy, Genetech's boardrooms were in disarray. Something had gone wrong at Alamira, very wrong. Dozens of installations lost. Entire research lines wiped out. No official footage survived. No combat logs. Just silence. The station hadn't been destroyed by rebels. There was no uprising, no resistance group. It was something else. Something they couldn't explain. And worse, they couldn't find the source. Every recon drone sent to the sector disappeared. Every scout ship returned with the corrupted data or never returned at all. The planet had somehow rewritten itself, sealing its wounds and closing its skies. A classified report circulated behind closed doors. Unknown entity. Gravitational manipulation outside calculable limits. Suspected hybrid genetic anomaly. Threat level existential. They gave it a name, the Starbound Protocol, and issued one directive. Do not engage, observe, contain if possible, eliminate if necessary. But they knew. It was already too late. Back on the unnamed world, the second child was born under twin moons. He entered the world glowing faintly, his cry shaking the trees like wind and song combined. His sister held his hand before he could open his eyes, and the resonance between them caused the ground to tremble with joy. The crops doubled in size overnight. By the time he took his first steps, the valley where they lived was blooming with plants that had never existed before. Seeds that healed wounds, leaves that stored energy, flowers that pulsed with memory. Drake and Ara watched their children grow and began teaching them the old names Ursulari Vakes, but the children weren't bound by the past. They created new words, new songs, new dances that made the rain fall or the soil sing. Their home became a beacon, not in technology, but in life, a sanctuary of synthesis, of what was possible when fear wasn't allowed to dictate evolution. And sometimes late at night when the stars were brightest, Drake would sit on the hill and look up at the sky. He'd remember what it felt like to kneel before Era hands on Crystal Crete, unsure, trembling, desperate to break her free. And now, she stood beside him with another child on her hip, a sword of energy folded into her DNA, and a laugh that could make planets bloom. "What are you thinking about?" she asked one night, wrapping her arms around his waist. Everything he said quietly, how close we came to never existing. She kissed his shoulder. "But we do. And if they come back," Ira smiled, teeth flashing like lightning under moonlight, "then we'll remind them why they should have left our roots buried." The stars wheeled overhead. The children laughed in the garden. And the future, once forged in chains and blood and despair, now grew wild and luminous across a world that had never known a name.